Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Police Brutality Podcast. We will be talking about police accountability today, and then our resident expert for today will be Erica Rios.
Hi everyone, I'm Erica. Um, okay, so I think the major question to ask when it comes to police accountability is who polices the police. And I think to start off, I think I want to begin by talking about the process for disciplining police officers. So all of what I'm about to say, you guys can find it on LAPD's website. But to give you guys a breakdown, it pretty much goes something like you can file a complaint in person at any police facility in LA. You can file it with the Internal Affairs Group, the Police Commission, or the Office of the Inspector General. All the complaints, you can either make them in person or online. There's a form called Complaint of Employee Misconduct that you can fill out, or you can do it over the phone. Anonymous complaints are also taken, but they're not likely to be investigated because normally there's not sufficient evidence that they can investigate in the first place. So to talk about the process, all complaints are reviewed by the Internal Affairs Group. It's also known as the IAG, and they're investigated by them before they're actually assigned to a proper investigation. And not all investigations are, so they don't take over every investigation. Depending on the misconduct, the personnel complaints may be investigated by IAG or at the divisional level. Complaints investigated by IAG are assigned to the accused officer's division of assignment or investigation. Disciplinary process for LAPD officers always starts with a complaint made against an officer, either by the public or another LAPD employee. Once the agency receives a complaint, it investigates the allegations internally. These investigations may include interviews of witnesses and officers, a review of department records, policies and procedures, an inspection of medical records, photographs and other evidence, and legal analysis. And they're usually a two-track investigation where the first step is to determine whether the police actually committed a crime. And it's investigated by either a neighboring police agency or a homicide force or a force investigation team within their own department. And then the second part of the investigation is to determine if the officer actually violated any department policies or tactics and asked to make a statement. The tricky thing is that this statement can't be used in criminal proceedings anyway. And then the last of this section here that I have, when a solution can't be resolved through what is called an alternative complaint resolution, which is used between the victim and the officer to kind of come up with some type of resolution. If that can't be reached where they can work out a complaint between them, then they'll have to go into what's called mediation and bring in somebody to represent each party. If they still can't come to any agreement there, then it would have to be taken to court. And yeah, do you guys have any questions so far, or?
That was a lot to unpack.
That is a lot to unpack. Okay, so pretty much the sum of it's what it's saying. It's any complaint, it's going to be investigated internally within their own department. There's no outside agency that polices the police.
So there's no there's no independent third party that's investigating police.
So LAPD has what is known as the Office of the Inspector General. The role of Inspector General audits, investigates, and oversees the police department's handling of complaints of misconduct by department employees and conducts other investigations. They report to the Board of Police Commissioners, and this board is comprised of 5 civilians who can recommend things such as reforms, ways to improve services to the public, how to reduce crime, and how to implement community policing programs. However, the executive director, who is the commission's chief of administrative officer, in LAPD's case, it would be Police Chief Michael Moore, has the ultimate say in any disciplinary and discharge actions. The Los Angeles Sheriff Department has a similar board referred to as a Civilian Oversight Agency, in which Sheriff Alex Villanueva acts as the executive director of this board.
How about for me? Let's start at the beginning. Why are we discussing police accountability? Like, what's kind of like the primary cause?
It's important to discuss police accountability because policing is supposed to be a public service, And many events that are taking place even to this day demonstrate that law enforcement can act in a way that's above the law and not receive any discipline for it. So it ultimately goes back to the public asking, where's the justice? Like, why should we turn to an agency that is excused from any behavior that the rest of us are being held accountable for? What I'm trying to get across with this episode is the lack of accountability that exists within police departments and the conflict of interest that's presented when it comes down to trying to hold them accountable.
I think we should have the others ask more questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we can just kind of delve into more topics as we continue.
All right. Sounds good. Anyone else have any other questions?
Oh, well, I mean, I didn't have a question, but it was more of a, like obviously talking about police accountability and how flawed the current structure is like important because of like trust. Like the police need to be trusted by the community for them to do their job effectively, and when the community doesn't trust them, everything just like stops working the way it's supposed. Well, it stops working, and no one gets helped in the end because people who need the help don't call, and then the people who do wrong don't get held accountable for their wrongdoings, and it's just a vicious cycle that continues.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm pretty sure everyone can think of a story that they heard where, yeah, the police didn't do their job. Like I have heard of stories where, like the officers abuse their power. Like the fact that there's a good portion of states in the U.S. right now where a woman who's being held in custody can be raped by a cop and it not be.
Wow,
And the
really?
cop, yeah. Apparently, in some states, a cop can have sex with someone in their custody. And so there's a lot of cases where women were saying like they raped me, and the cop was saying like, oh no, like I didn't do that. And then it's like,
Wow.
like that shouldn't be allowed, obviously.
Yeah.
I know that in California that's not a thing, but I do know that in I don't remember what state it is. I think it's like Rhode Island. It's still a thing.
So I'm not sure what the actual law is because different states have different laws, but there is a petition on change.org which calls for making it illegal for cops to have sex with detainees. The law, I guess, allows room for a loophole in which officers can claim that sex with someone in their custody was consensual. But many people argue against that because I guess people see it that when you're in police custody, people ultimately give up their rights to someone in power and therefore consent can't be given.
Basically, a law that says that police detainee sex is possible. Like it's like a cop can have sex with someone in their custody, and when women were being raped by the cops were using that rule as a, oh, I didn't rape her, she consented, when she's saying like, no, I didn't consent.
That is pretty much saying that she asked me to, or that she was okay with it. Yeah, I think that was the issue.
Yeah. Apparently in 35 states a cop can have sex with someone in their custody.
34. Yeah, I do. Yeah, it is legal, sort of.
But they're using this law here to basically avoid convictions of rape and sexual assault.
Oh, they're just not calling it rape.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just not calling it rape.
They're using this to defend themselves, the cops who do this, and it's obviously wrong, but
yeah,
this is why internal investigations can't be trusted. Because
there's a conflict of interest.
If a doctor can't perform surgery on their own child or family member, then, or even friends, like I don't think it's ethical for doctors to or surgeons to perform surgery on someone that they personally know. Unless they're the only available surgeon in the area. I think when you're investigating crimes, it should function the same way. Like you and your friends should not be evaluating whether or not you broke the law.
Yeah, there's definitely conflict of interest with that. And I think with those internalized criminal investigations, that's something that's been criticized for years for the bias behind it. And that's a hard thing to break, and to fix. Actually, police accountability, it's people have tried to come up with reforms and ways to hold them accountable, and there's papers and documents that attempt, I guess, to hold police accountable, but the thing is they're no effect if nobody puts them into action, if nobody enforces them. And the culture within the police department, if it would take strong leadership and somebody that actually wants to do good within the actual department and for the public, because it is a public service. You would need strong political leadership to want to change things, and someone like Sheriff Alex Villanueva isn't looking to use community policing programs. And then he demonstrated this firsthand when he defied a subpoena to appear before the County Civilian Oversight Commission when he was being investigated earlier this year, but about how he and his command staff handled photographs taken by deputies at the site of the helicopter crash that killed Kobe Bryant and the other people. And that's what I tell you guys. If there's no strong leadership to want to change things or to want to shift the culture within that department, it's going to be, everything looks good in paper. But like I said, you have to have people that are willing to enforce it and actually apply these civilian oversight commissions.
Yeah, I was going to say, you brought up the Kobe Bryant helicopter incident. And I remember hearing about how police officers or people who went to the scene were taking pictures.
Yeah.
And showing their family members the pictures of their dead bodies. And that and the fact that they told TMZ before the family even found out.
Yeah. Correct.
Like that needs to be severely punished. And it upsets me that nothing has happened to these people. I think there's also a point to be made in how defensive and aggressive the police get whenever they're questioned in any way at all. It's like they don't they take any words against the system as a direct attack against themselves, and that's not what we're trying to do. Like, we're trying to make everything function at its best, and so everyone can be taken care of, can be supported, and like this back and forth or this aggression that they just come with isn't productive in any way at all.
Right.
So that's kind of why people want a third party to investigate police, to try to kind of, I guess, equal out the playing field, for lack of better words. And they try to do that with something called citizen oversight agencies. So far, the reason why these haven't held up is because these agencies are only allowed to make recommendations about the discipline they receive, but they can't actually enforce it. Again, that's why it goes back to it goes back ultimately to the same thing. For them investigating each other, I don't see one officer turning their back on another. And there actually was a case, I don't know if you guys heard about it. Hold on, let me see.
Okay, the incident involved an African-American woman named Carrie Horn, who was a 19-year veteran of the Buffalo Police Department. She had responded to an officer in trouble call back in 2006. Mind you, at this time, officers weren't required to wear body cams. So the way she recounts the incident is when she arrived, a white officer named Greg Kwiatkowski, I hope I didn't butcher his last name, had a black suspect handcuffed. And so you guys can have a better mental image, the handcuffs were placed in the front of the suspect, not like on his back as required by protocol. even though another officer had already offered to replace the handcuffs the proper way. The incident kept unfolding, and she helped these officers carry out the suspect from inside the home onto the front yard, and it was then when Officer Kwiatkowski crouched down and began choking the suspect. Carrie O'Horn verbally told Officer Kwiatkowski to stop choking him, and when he didn't listen, she grabbed his arm from around the suspect's neck to release his chokehold, and it was then that he turned his aggression to her and punched her. Fast forward to after the incident, she filed the complaint against Officer Kwiatkowski, and instead of him receiving any disciplinary action, she was fired and refused her pension, even though she was months away from serving 20 years and making her eligible for it. She was charged with intervening and placing her fellow officers in danger, and testimonies from other officers involved in that call says she jumped on him. Although she's filed many appeals, she hasn't been successful at the time of this recording.
Yeah, it's completely unfair.
Because the culture, it's the whole culture of the department that doesn't allow this sort of this investigation to like work, if that makes sense. Because you have everyone against. So if you do anything, I guess, in a way that will go against your fellow, I don't know, coworkers. I mean, I guess coworkers. Yeah, if you go against your fellow coworkers, then it's just not. I guess it's just looked down upon, and then they can just report you for it.
And then you always have police unions and police departments always trying to find ways to push back. Like, even no matter what, I mean, it can be as clear as day what they did was wrong, and somehow, some way, they'll find a loophole to get out of it and justify what they. Well, I don't know if justify is the right word, because we all know it, justice is not really being served. But
right.
Yeah, there's always pushback from them, and no matter what, they hate taking accountability at the end of the day, and that's why it's so hard to make reforms. It's so hard to use community policing programs. It all looks good.
Well, it's because the police departments themselves don't want this third party to investigate them.
Of course not.
Yeah, they don't want that, which is the issue. It's like, look, if you don't have anything wrong with you, with your department, why would you not? Like, why are you so afraid of letting someone else investigate? It just doesn't make any. I mean, it's the simplest logic. Like, look, if you got something wrong, you're guilty, you're gonna be scared. You don't want people to look. You don't want people to find out. So you push back against it. But then we have them just fighting over it, and this is why nothing gets done.
Yeah, and LAPD, it's so huge. It's such a huge department that it's extremely difficult to change something that's so rooted into their norm, I guess you can say.
The culture of LAPD.
Yeah.
I also want to say that, speaking about culture, I remember seeing a documentary, or it was a movie about a man who was one of those, I don't remember their gang's official name, but it was like, they called them like those white skinheads. Like they would shave their heads to be completely bald, and they were like white supremacists.
I think I've seen part of this.
And I remember seeing ex-members of like the white supremacist type group saying that part of the thing that they did was they started to join the police. That way they can help like their other members get away with stuff.
Wow.
So you have this, what is essentially a gang, joining the police to take advantage of the system because they know that they have this advantage. And so they use their like undercover status. It's not even undercover, but they use their status as a police officer to help other members get away with stuff, and to hold this power that they have over other minority groups because that's what they wanted. And then they start abusing their power because they know that they'll be protected by their fellow members that are also police officers, and then the culture of the culture that police officers have in general of taking care of each other and covering for each other. So they have like these two layers working together.
Yeah, and to add to that, there's also their qualified immunity, which we talked about in the last episode. It's something that they feel protected by as well. How are we ever supposed to hold them accountable if, yeah, qualified immunity pretty much it's a free pass for them, pretty much do whatever they want at the end of the day, and have no discipline for it, for their actions. No, yeah, nothing pretty much.
Yeah, like I would say like they probably even use even normal cops. They can abuse their powers in like little ways. And just like, oh, they get caught speeding when they're in their civilian clothes and stuff, and when a cop comes up, pulls them over for speeding, all they have to do is flash their badge and be like, oh yeah, I'm a cop too. And they'll let go. They'll get let go.
Yep. Yeah.
Can we talk about Breonna Taylor and how the people that or the police officers that shot her have not been punished? And now one of them is attempting to sue the boyfriend for, I think for something like psychological damages. I don't exactly remember, but I think that's just absurd. So first, the police officers, they killed an innocent woman because they broke into the wrong room. First of all, they broke into the wrong room. They killed an innocent woman, and nothing happens to them, basically. Okay, obviously the public hates them, but the police department takes basically no action against them. And then now we have an officer who is trying to sue the now deceased person for damages, which just makes no sense at all. And I don't understand how and why the justice system is allowing this kind of thing to happen.
No, I was just gonna say it's completely ridiculous. It's like, one, they had a no-knock warrant, right? Then they broke into the wrong house. Then they shot first. I believe they were after a male suspect, so the fact that they even shot at a woman makes no sense. She was asleep, and then they try to claim it was in self-defense when her boyfriend got his own gun, which obviously just in your logic makes no, in common sense makes no sense, because the boyfriend was under the assumption that the cops were intruders, so he was acting in self-defense, and they had just shot at his girlfriend. And I don't understand how it's completely ridiculous that you can try to claim that these officers weren't not in the wrong, because they were in the wrong just in the fact that they went into the wrong house. The fact that they went into the wrong house, I think, is punishable by being fired, because then they shot and killed the person who was in the wrong house.
Right.
I triple check when I'm looking at someone's address. I triple check before I send a text message, an important text message. It's like, how do you not check multiple times that the house you're going into is the correct house?
Yeah, I agree. And I think going back to John's question, like, why can't any of these officers be held accountable? It's like I was talking earlier on in the episode about the second investigation, about determining if the officers actually violated any policies or tactics.
Okay, so I'm going to read to you guys exactly what the article says. It's a little bit long, so bear with me. A plaintiff bringing a 1983 constitutional claim against an individual officer must allege facts showing that the officer acted under color of state law in depriving him or her of constitutionally guaranteed rights. If a defendant then asserts that he or she acted reasonably within the confines of the law, a separate qualified immunity analysis is required. Qualified immunity is a judicial doctrine designed to exercise fairness to the public official defendant. In the citizen recording context, this means recognizing that police officers are neither lawyers nor judges and should not be held personally responsible for exercising reasonable discretion in enforcing the gray, unsettled fringes of the law. When a public official raises a qualified immunity defense, in addition to the substantive question of whether a constitutional right existed and was violated, the court must also make the slightly different inquiry whether such a right was clearly established at the time of the disputed official action. Thus, the qualified immunity inquiry typically unfolds into two additional but related steps. Courts examine how settled the area of law from which the violation arose was at the time of the disputed conduct, and whether a reasonably competent person in the defendant's position would have been aware that the law acted accordingly. So pretty much what it's saying is that depending on how clear the law was at the time of the incident, an officer can defend themselves saying he or she acted reasonably given the situation, and if the same situation were to present itself to another officer, he or she would have taken the same course of action. And yes, although police officers aren't judges or lawyers, he or she should be held more accountable and trained to know what the laws are instead of being trained on how to go around them or having immunity against them.
So it's just technicalities that are just
bingo. That's what it is.
Yeah, just blocking people from actually getting the justice that I think they deserve.
And it's not even just like they did something wrong before, because I believe one of the officers involved in the incident was accused of sexual assault multiple times.
Okay, if like I don't understand this. Why is there an officer who has been accused of sexual assault multiple times? Like, oh my goodness.
So it's not even just that they have to do something wrong. It's that they have to make the same exact mistake, or they have to do the same thing multiple times in order for it to be taken seriously, which is ridiculous, because if a doctor performs surgery drunk even once, if a surgeon performs surgery drunk once, they will get fired.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, same with a criminal record too. You mess up once, that's on your record forever. That's never going away.
And that's why it's hard to hold them to any standard for that reason, because there's so many things that applies to everybody else that does not apply to them. That's the hard part. That's the complicated part.
Yeah. So Rebecca, we have been talking a lot. Do you have any?
Yeah, I was trying to butt in. But have you guys heard of something called the Blue Wall of Silence?
Blue Wall of Silence? No.
I have not.
So it is like basically stands for the code of silence that police officers have. And it's like not to report any of their colleagues' errors, any misconduct, crimes, or like kind of stay silent. If something went wrong, no one speaks out about it. It's actually like a thing in between officers that they like call it a blue code or a blue wall of silence.
It's like an unspoken code, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like you don't snitch on the bully in school.
Yeah, basically like not to snitch. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's from what I've heard, it's actually like really like done within police officers, so people actually really follow it. And that also leads into like why can't these police officers be tried or prosecuted, because everyone stays silent and no one brings about the truth. They all kind of just protect each other.
And the people who do break the blue wall are now persecuted by the rest of the members.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
I heard about that, where a guy who was, I don't think he became a cop in the end, or maybe he is, but he said that when he was at the police academy, one of his teachers told them all to like write stuff down on anyone who wasn't doing anything correctly, or someone who wasn't acting very like someone who wasn't acting friendly or was being confrontational. And this guy said that he thought he was doing the good thing of like writing down the people who were being essentially bullies in the class and the people who were being like super aggressive and racist. And he said that his note got read out to the class by the instructor, and the instructor went up to him and was like, "We don't snitch on each other."
Wait, so is this in an academy?
Yeah, this was in his academy.
So it just start. It starts from there.
It starts from.
It
It,
starts
yeah,
from
it could
there.
start
definitely.
it could start as soon as there.
Yeah, it starts from the training. This is the environment you're suddenly thrust into, you know? If this is supported by your instructors, this is how the entire class is going to turn out, you know? And you
Exactly.
Yeah,
weed out and
the guy said that he got beat up after.
wow. You weed
Yeah.
out like the people that are now quote unquote different, so then you keep the rest that are just that will follow the I guess the blue wall silence.
Mhm.
That's a great point.
And that's what it all leads up to, because there's a lot of people saying hire more female cops, hire more black cops, hire more, pretty much a more diverse group to be able to police your own kind, I guess. But it wouldn't necessarily matter if you're putting them through the same academy, the same type of training, because they're going to come out of there either with the same mindset, or they're going to get weeded out by doing such things like that, like snitching, I guess, on your coworkers, classmates.
Yeah, I would say that it isn't even just with police officers, it's also with like probation officers too. Like my father, my father is a probation officer, and he has that complete like mindset where he thinks he's above other people, like normal civilian people. He thinks he's like above them. He himself is Mexican Cuban, and he is totally racist toward other minority groups, including other Latinos. Like he went through this training. He's part of this like camaraderie type group, and I've heard him say like the racist, rudest things about some people, or like even people that he's like helped arrest. Like my mom's friend, my mom has a friend whose cousin was actually arrested by my dad and a couple of cops, and the man was telling my mom like, oh yeah, he's an asshole.
Wow.
Like he was worse than the actual cops.
Oh, dang.
And so it's like you go, even if you're a minority, when you go through these types of like training programs and you're surrounded by these people with these mentalities, it doesn't matter that you're a minority. You'll just learn to
Pick up their behavior.
you just learn to pick up on their behavior and do the same thing they're doing to other people, maybe even your own group.
Yeah, you're socialized into it.
Another thing that I wanted to say, that police officers are also protected by police unions who, to this day, have done their job almost too well.
I was about to say that, yeah, too well.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, obviously officers need protection, because there are people out there that will look for cops or accuse cops of doing such things, such horrendous things. So obviously that they need protection as well. But yeah, these police unions, they're doing their job so well that I feel like they have tunnel vision, that they forget that these cops also still need to be held accountable for the wrong things that they've done, and they've gotten so good at protecting them. I think that line, it's pretty much invisible to them. There's no line. Like their sole job is just became to protect the cops at all costs, no matter what they did, no matter what crime was committed or what right was violated. And that's the hard part. Police unions and another organization called the Fraternal Order of Police, all of those work against all efforts made to hold them accountable. So when you have those organizations that are strong and so powerful, it's police accountability is a really difficult thing to execute at the end of the day. It looks good on paper, but it's a lot more complicated, and it's not as black and white as a lot of us want to believe it is.
So would you say that police unions are the biggest enemy for people who want like police reform, or at least in terms of police accountability?
Yeah, I would say so. The thing, it's just hard because, like I said earlier, police officers obviously need protection too, and we commented in the first episode that majority of them are good,
Right.
and most of them want to do good, and they're put in situations sometimes that you or for the most part, most people wouldn't understand how they would act until they're in those situations. So yeah, they need protection, but I I think when it comes to investigating, there definitely needs to be an outside agency so that there is no conflict of interest. And
sorry, go ahead. My bad.
their reason for not using outside okay, sorry. Their reason for not wanting to use a third party is because they believe civilians aren't educated enough or aren't trained enough to handle these type of affairs. But same thing goes back to what we were talking about police training. If they're trained sufficiently, if they have enough hours in all these subjects, say mental health, first aid, traffic laws, pretty much anything. Like, I forgot how much we said that they have to. A regular academy was what, 14 weeks? Did we say about 13, 14 weeks?
On average, it's 600 hours.
Okay, so you're talking about 600 hours, and their means of not using a third party agency is because they say civilians aren't educated or well trained enough to handle these type of calls. I just don't understand why is it okay for them to only have 600 hours of training.
That's about 15. That's about 15 weeks.
About 15 weeks, right?
Okay, yeah, if you're doing a 40-hour week, that's about 15 weeks.
Yeah, I just don't understand why they can go through an academy that fast and they are not willing to help an organization such as a community policing program to educate them. Like, how would we go about handling police complaints? And I just definitely think there needs to be an outside party.
And how would this outside party, like, who would the outside party consist of?
Citizens, necessarily.
Okay. So like the community, basically. Members of the community that are willing to do it?
Correct. Or independent investigators, maybe not specifically the community, but somebody different from the police department, because right now it's all handled internally.
Right.
Yeah, but necessarily, I guess, to answer your question, yeah, citizens of the community.
Yeah. What if we had, like, say, a separate federal department that is dedicated solely to investigating, like, police departments? How do you think that would work? Everyone can answer this question, so it's just an open question.
I think it would be good to have a separate a department just for these types of things that's separate, because then they can't use the excuse that they aren't educated enough, because these people would be educated, and I would say they would be even more educated.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have any biases because they're not involved in the...
They can't have any biases. If they do, then they need... Oh, you always have to internally investigate. That's always complicated. Sorry, I am interrupting. Sorry.
No, yeah, but they wouldn't have any biases because their coworkers are. They wouldn't have the biases of, like, oh, well, they're from the same police department. This is like a completely different entity that is examining these instances, and I think it would take away a lot of what makes it so flawed. But I do think that the rules themselves, the laws themselves need to be changed. Like, you can't have all these little technicalities anymore. And then you have to have judges that aren't, that don't have biases toward, that don't have any biases toward giving leniency to police officers. And you can't have any judges that are being bought out. You can't have any judges that are not examining everything fairly.
I agree. And that's a hard thing to break apart, though, because I feel like any time a complaint goes to court when it involves a police officer, a judge usually favors on law enforcement side, and
I think it's
that's
because there's more laws protecting them, right?
yeah,
So the
that is
lawyers
true.
have an easier time providing arguments to protect the
Police
officers.
officer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I'm remembering that case where these two kids were being heavily abused and neglected in the home, and the father was a police officer,
Oh man.
and the school repeatedly filed like the school repeatedly filed complaints about how the two sons were coming in beat, dirty, in the same dirty clothes. They didn't have any like supplies, and then it all came to a head, and the court was completely giving the they were giving the kids back to the father and the mother because he was a cop. And so he kept requesting for the kids, and they would just give him the kids, and then it all came to a head when one of them froze to death in their garage.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Like that's what happened. Like that's how this ended. Like one of the kids died. And then at first the father was trying to claim that it was like a one-off incident, that it was just like an accident that happened.
One off. Okay.
Yeah, he was trying to claim that it was an accident when it was like, no, you locked him in the garage and he froze to death because it was like the middle of winter, or it was
That's
like
horrible.
December or January, and this was like in New York or something, like the state of New York. It was in one of the East Coast states, and it was ridiculous. And it was because the school had the teachers were saying yes, the boys were coming to school in like urine stained pants, the same clothes repeatedly, like they hadn't showered, they hadn't ate, they didn't even have their backpacks. It was really bad, and he got away with it so much because they were just like, oh well, he's a cop, these claims aren't correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think there should just be a completely separate, like board or trial that officers have to go through, that kind of takes away any favoritism in the system. I mean, I know we keep on going back to doctors, but when doctors do something unethical, they get tried by like a board, a medical board, and there should be something kind of similar where there's it's a little bit different from like a judge system where there's trained police officers or people in that field that can judge without any like favoritism involved or any protections involved, so that way it can be fair.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
We keep going back to doctors because they're so heavily regulated that they have one of the best systems to look at and to reference.
Well, they're held
Because-
to one of the highest standards.
As should police
because
officers.
yeah, exactly, because our lives also depend on them, and then that's the thing, that when someone's life is in your hands, it just shouldn't be so easy to dismiss or disregard actions towards someone. You're there to protect at the end of the day. Protect and serve, that's their motto.
Right. I guess that's probably one of the biggest issues, because I feel like, I don't want to say the majority of police officers, but a good number of police officers become officers not because, out of the goodness of their hearts, they're, I want to help, make the world a better place. It's like, no, I need a job.
Yeah.
Or it could start as like, oh, I want to help everyone, but as like a couple years later, then it's like, now it's just a job, and you want things to be convenient for you,
Yeah.
So that's the unfortunate part, I think. I don't know what to do about that.
Alrighty, guys. I think that's all I got.
Yeah, that is fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at my notes.
A lot.
Thank you for setting that up, though. I wouldn't have figured that out.
No, it's okay.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for listening. And have a good night.